This week for Friday Forums, just for those of you that aren't aware, Friday Forums are a way for Plan 2020 to show and highlight community projects and initiatives happening in Indianapolis. So they're our way to kind of illustrate all the things that are shaping and informing Plan 2020. And this week we're lucky to be joined by Aquila, who is the Assistant Administrator for the Department of Metropolitan Development. She's going to be talking about the Community Economic Development Strategy for Indianapolis and Marion County. So, Erica?
No need to applaud, thank you. As Alex said, my name is Aquila. I'm Assistant Administrator with the Division of Community Economic Development. I am the Assistant Administrator over the Community Resource section, which is the section that houses all of the federal funding that we receive from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. We do have other grant funding that comes through our department, but that is handled in the other various sections like our brownfield section or our transportation. So I'm going to be talking solely about our community economic development dollars from HUD. Just a little background, I've been with the city for almost 14 years, it'll be 14 in October. Started out as a grant manager and then have been assistant administrator for almost the last 6. So I know a little something about what I'm talking about. And I have Evan Tester with me. He is my grant manager over the Community Development Block Grant, which is the biggest block of money that we receive from HUD. As you can see, I'm primarily going to focus on our 2015 to 2019 Consolidated Plan. Don't worry right now if you don't know what that is. You will by the end of this presentation. But these funds that we receive are entitlement funds, which means we get these funds every year from HUD regardless. They're not competitive, we don't have to compete for them, but we do have to submit every 5 years a 5-year plan outlining for HUD, and I'm probably getting way ahead of myself, but how we're going to spend these, just like it says. I'm not going to read this verbatim because I've done this so much, I have it memorized, so you can read it, but I'm going to just go over it. Again, the Consolidated Plan is a very thought-out, community-based plan. We're going through the planning process right now. We have hired a consultant. Her name is Alicia Vaughn, and she works with city consultants and research to write this plan for us. Again, it's very data-driven. It involves stakeholder engagement, community engagement. What we're doing right now is part of our community engagement piece for the Consolidated Plan. After we do that analysis, we come up with priorities and goals, and we submit this to HUD. We will submit this to HUD, it's due November 15th. This will tell HUD for the next 5 years, this is how the city of Indianapolis envisions spending the federal grant dollars that you are going to be providing to them. What we are required to do after that is every year we have to send an update to that Consolidated Plan, which is called our Annual Action Plan. And that tells HUD specifically, okay, we told you in our 5-year plan the overarching what we were going to do. The Annual Action Plan gets into the weeds and says, here's how we're going to do it. Here's who we're going to fund. Here's who's going to get the money and how we're going to do it for that particular year. So we're kind of in a unique situation this year as 2015 starts our new Consolidated Plan. So we are going to be writing and releasing our Consolidated Plan in October. At the same time, we're also going to be submitting our first action plan under that Consolidated Plan. So this is always a weird time for us when we're going through this phase. Again, I just said this, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. There are 4 major grant programs that fall under the Consolidated Plan. As I stated earlier, the Community Development Block Grant is our biggest funding source for the city. Approximately $8 million annually, $8.4 million. As with all federal funding, it's steadily on the decline. I think at one point in time, when I first started with the city 14 years ago, that was a $12 million grant. So you can see, and we always anticipate a 5 to 10% reduction every year. So as the demand and the need for this funding goes up, unfortunately, the money we receive is going down. And it's based on a formula from HUD, and we have no control over it, and it's a census-based driven formula. So the CDBG grant can be used to provide decent housing, secure a stable living environment, and expand economic development opportunities for persons at or below 80% of the median family income. All of the federal funding that we receive from HUD has that requirement that it must serve families and individuals at 80% or below the median family income. That's the purpose of HUD. And then in that we have a caveat. We have construction costs that are allowable and public service costs. So your cost for like homeless service providers, youth programs, seniors, those are capped at 15%. So 15% of our $8 million can go towards public service types activities, which is a little over $1 million every year. The second program is our Home Investment Partnership Program. Again, it's approximately $3 million. Same as always, it's gone down drastically. At one point in time, it was up around the $5–6 million. This can solely be used for the creation or expansion of affordable housing. There's no public service type activities attached to this. It's strictly the bricks and sticks. The one thing is it can pay for down payment assistance, which our program runs through the Indianapolis Neighborhood Housing Partnership. But it will still provide decent, safe, affordable housing to individuals at 80% or below. And then we have the Emergency Solutions Grant. This is what's called one of our Human Services Grant. Very small grant to serve a very large and much needed population. It's approximately $700,000, and it's to provide supportive services and operation and homelessness prevention to homeless service providers. That's solely what it can do. Its primary focus is on the housing aspect of that. So we use a lot of the funding. 60% of that $700,000 goes towards homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing type programs, which means we're paying to get someone housed and stay housed, whether that's through rental assistance or rental assistance coupled with the housing case management services to make sure people understand what they need to stay in their house. And then the last one is a very specific and very targeted grant. It's really the only grant we have that is this specific, and it's just because that's the way Congress wrote it. And it's called the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS Grant, or HOPWA for short. It's about $950,000 annually, and really the sole purpose of that is to provide rental assistance to individuals and families at 80% or below that have a family member or themselves HIV/AIDS positive. And there is case management in that as well, but again, it's case management to help support housing activities. As I stated, we have to develop priorities and goals for our consolidated plan that we will provide to HUD to make sure that we are in line with what HUD wants us to do, but also what our community's priorities are. HUD has kind of changed the system that we used for this coming consolidated plan and going forward. And what they have told us is if you list something as a priority in your consolidated plan, you have to fund it. So we are obviously taking a lot of time and a lot of effort to make sure that we really get the true needs captured. So these are just in draft form right now. Again, we have until October 15th to release the full draft of the full consolidated plan to the public. But right now, here are the priorities and goals that we've set out again in draft form. There's an email provided at the end of the presentation if you want to comment on these priorities or goals or anything that I've presented today. So you'll have to bear with me. I probably will have to read these because they literally were just developed this week, so I don't have them memorized. Priority 1 is to strengthen and create vibrant neighborhoods for all income groups. Again, we have to narrow that a little bit because we have to focus on 80% and below, but keeping in the spirit of Plan 2020, which is obviously a Marion County-wide plan, we fit in how we can and how we need to. So support facade improvements and a focused effort, 35 over 5 years. And we're not saying that has to be 7 per year, just at the end of the 5 years that we've created, we've improved 35 facades. Goal 2 is support neighborhood revitalization efforts, and Evan, you can explain this, of a CBDO or CDFI, 2 projects in 5 years. I'm going to have Evan explain to you what exactly that means, because he knows it. He can explain it better because he lives it and breathes it. So, Evan, I will have you explain that before I move on.
Hello. A CBDO is a community-based development organization that can be almost any nonprofit. It's a special designation that the city will grant, but it's HUD approved. It basically allows certain flexibilities in the regulations, which are rigid, to be honest. And then a CDFI is a community development financial institution, mostly banks or any kind of lending institution. And like the CBDO, regulations are more flexible, but they mostly do loans. So that will go to a small business seeking a loan. It will be repaid back. There will be a lower interest. And usually they have greater flexibility, and they go to areas that normally we don't work in, because they may not have the exact, the greater number of low-income residents, but they still have enough that it still has a significant need. So we send those groups out to those areas, we fund them, and then they provide loans or some kind of other activity.
Thank you. That's why I have him, to explain the nitty-gritty details. And then goal 3 is to support owner-occupied rehab through loans to persons earning less than 80%. That's typically what you probably know, are familiar with, as our homeowner repair program. That'll be 400 homes in over 5 years. Currently, I think we average anywhere from 120 to 150 homes a year as it is, so that should be no problem. Goal 4 is kind of a new venture for us. We don't typically, haven't in the past typically used our CDBG funding for infrastructure. Part of the reason of that is the rule, and Evan can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the caveats of using our money for infrastructure is if that infrastructure is already a part of city government, they don't want us using our federal funds in that repair, Well, we have a Department of Public Works that deals with the streets and sidewalks. So we're not necessarily going to be building a street or a sidewalk, but we'll go in and maybe, one of the things we're doing in 2014 is we're building a stronger crosswalk to Willard Park. That crosswalk right there is not safe, but it's heavily used. So we awarded funding to Riley Area Development Corporation to improve that crosswalk. Or we might help with some minor infrastructure improvements outside of a development that we're doing, but we're not going to necessarily be repairing streets and sidewalks, because we have a department in the city that does that. 2 projects in 5 years. And the reason what the NRSA is a special designation based on low-income census tracts. And if we do projects within the NRSA, basically some of your typical HUD rules don't apply, and it's much easier to do in there. If we do a project outside of the NRSA, then there is a much more level, in-depth detail of reporting and tracking, and it's sometimes just not feasible. You're not going to have an organization be able to even track the information. So we want to keep that strictly within the NRSA, so that that tracking mechanism, it means it's an assumed benefit. If you're inside the NRSA, it means it's assumed that area is all low mod. And so since it's an assumed benefit, you don't have to prove that everyone in that area is at 80% or below. So that's one of the reasons it's easier to use it in the NRSA. Goal 5 is to support the development of multifamily housing with low-income housing tax credits. So the state of Indiana has a low-income housing tax credit program that developers apply to. They usually apply for the funding, the tax credits in the fall, and then find out in the spring. But what we've typically done is said to those developers, they go through a very rigorous application process through us. If you are awarded and receive your tax credits through the state, then we will provide you home funding as well. to help with the financing package of your tax credit multifamily housing. And then that also helps us to get to a mixed use and mixed income concept, because we can go in with our federal funds and do the units for 80% and below, however many we designate based on the dollar amount of funding, and then the rest of the development can be market rate, and it can have a commercial component where that's typically what we see. So that's what that means. 200 units over 5 years, which is completely able to achieve. Create home ownership opportunities for 80% and below. Again, this is creating single family units for low income individuals. 25 over 5 years, and it looks like it says negative 25, but it's actually 25 over 5 years. Again, that's completely achievable. Create a wide range of housing opportunities for households living with disabilities through a tenant-based rental assistance program. We have been in conversations with an organization for the last several years that deals strictly with persons with disabilities, and primarily physical disabilities, and the need for them to be able to have rental assistance to live. So we are developing what's called a tenant-based rental assistance program. Goal 8 is to support home ownership opportunities by providing down payment assistance. And again, we run that program. We award this funding to the Indianapolis Neighborhood Housing Partnership. And then anybody interested in purchasing a home will go through them and be approved through their process for down payment assistance. Goal 2, this is getting to that public service, that 15% that I talked about through CDBG. Aid youth education programs and employment activities. Goal 1 is support youth academic activities. Now 20,000 may seem like a very large number, but we can tell you that I think, Evan, what'd you tell me? They're on track right now to serve 9? Yeah, close to.
Just this year.
Yeah, what'd you say? I'm sorry.
Just this year, they'll serve several thousand.
Yeah, so that's a realistic number. I actually cut it down a little bit. So it looks like a large number, and I thought that as I was writing it, but I'm like, no, if we're serving about 9,000 this year, then I think that we can completely do that. And then support summer employment programs, 100 youth in 5 years. And we are in partnership with the Lilly Endowment and CICF and some of the other major funders through what's called the Summer Youth Program Fund. We are a contributor to that. And so that is primarily where that will come from, is through the partnership for the Summer Youth Program. Priority 3, Indy will be an enticing area for business to relocate to, or will foster an environment where businesses will grow. Goal 1 is to support job training and placement programs. Again, you've heard me say this word several times, we're very big on partnership in our department. And so we work with Employ Indy. We have a relationship with them. They're the experts in the field of employment, not us. So we award them the funding. They have their own allocation process, RFP process, in which they select entities, organizations that they will provide the job training and employment support to. 250 job placements in 5 years. So that's people who are actually placed, not just people who went through the training. Our goal is to have them placed. We will still track the training piece of it, but what we'll report to HUD is the number of placements. And then support business expansion and new businesses by job creation activities. Aid at least 4 businesses to create 75 new full-time equivalent jobs over 5 years. So that's our economic development. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Where are the individuals that are going to be in this training and placement program?
She asked, where are the individuals that are involved in these training programs going to come from? Like I said, we award the money to Employ Indy, and then they release a request for proposals from community centers, Work One centers, or whomever wishes to apply, they apply to Employ Indy. And then Employ Indy will go through a selection process to select what organizations receive that funding. And then it'll be the individuals that come into that organizations. I think typically, and Evan can correct me if I'm wrong, Bonner Center receives some of that money, Flanner House receives some of that money. A lot of the community centers that are Work One centers receive that funding.
I have a little trouble hearing you because of the acoustics, but if the person's interested, do they apply for the program or is it
No.
the center or community?
Okay, she asked if a person is interested, do they apply for the funding or do they have to go through the center? None of our funding can be awarded to individuals. Our funding can only be awarded to nonprofit organizations or for-profit in the case of development. So if you know an individual that would like to receive assistance through any of these programs that we've talked about, you would need to reach out to the appropriate community center, or again, if you're a homeowner, go through INHP. So contact any community center or the one closest to you and ask them, and they would be able to help you. Goal 2, again, that's getting at our economic development component. You know, obviously, the big push is we want people to not only work in Marion County, because we got that covered. People like to work here, but we need them to work here and live here. So we want to draw businesses that will draw the employees and then the employees to stay. And so we will do that by providing businesses with loans to, it doesn't necessarily have to be startup business. We're working with one right now where they're currently established and located in Noblesville, but they're bringing their headquarters here. And so we're hoping that when they bring their headquarters here, the employees will follow. But we gave them funding in 2014 to acquire the building and do some minor rehab, and then the developer is incurring 100% of the rest of the cost to actually get it where it needs to be and get it staffed. So that's going to create jobs. Whenever we use the Community Development Block Grant funding for economic development, there is a required number of jobs that must be created based on the dollar amount of funding. So, and Evan will monitor that, and if they fail to meet that obligation, then obviously that's money that would come back to us and we could award to another entity who could fulfill those job requirements. Priority 4, we will increase access to assistance that keeps individuals and families in their homes. This is getting to the rental assistance and stuff that I talked about through the Emergency Solutions Grant. Serve individual families with prevention and stabilization services. Of those, 10% will meet the definition of chronic. That's a HUD thing. HUD's really big focus with these funds is to get people who have been on the streets for long periods of time. They're typically your hardest to reach and the ones that are the most resistant to coming in and resistant to getting services. So HUD really wants homeless service providers, the outreach workers, the people out there doing the work every day to get at least 10% of those to agree to come in for some level of service. Priority 5, we will help individuals and family find permanent, suitable housing and reduce their lengths of stay in a shelter. Right now, our average length of stay in a shelter is 37 days. And so we want to, and HUD has a requirement that we help decrease that. And so our goals, I don't want to bore you by reading them, but they're up there, and this presentation will be online, and you can get it from us at any time. And again, it's up for public comment right now too. Priority 6, we will increase coordination and effectiveness of street outreach services. Again, under the Emergency Shelter Grant, HUD requires that a certain portion of our money go to outreach. So we will do that through this goal. Priority 7 deals with our housing opportunities with AIDS program. We have to have goals specifically for that, written specifically for that program and not coupled in our other ones. So it's just to provide tenant-based rental assistance, short-term rental assistance, housing stabilization, and then those services that I talked about. And I'm done. And like I said, written comments on the draft consolidated plan priorities and goals. Again, Alicia Vaughn is our consultant. Her email address is alicia.vaughn@sbcglobal.net. She will be happy to take all of your public comments, work with us to provide answers. And again, this is all part of our consolidated process for the consolidated plan. So all of this, just so you know, will be used as public input, and so therefore it will be made public unless you specifically have a question or concern that you preface with. But again, remember, we're government, and anything that we receive via email or written is pretty much public information at that point. So I'll entertain any further questions that anyone has. Okay, being none, meeting is adjourned.